You won't believe what went down when Solo Sikoa tried to set up Jacob Fatu, but the plan backfired, big time. In this explosive SmackDown moment, Solo Sikoa finds himself in handcuffs after attempting to frame Jacob Fatu for a car wreck. But WWE law enforcement isn't buying his story. Watch the full drama unfold as the tides turn inside the Bloodline, and Solo's lies catch up to him. It was supposed to be just another Friday night under the lights of WWE SmackDown. But what unfolded behind the curtain left the entire locker room in stunned silence, and the WWE universe reeling with disbelief. A moment that started with a wrecked car and a shattered alliance ended with Solo Sikoa, the self-proclaimed enforcer of the Bloodline, in handcuffs. Not as a hero. Not even as a victim. But as the accused. Because on this night, Solo Sikoa tried to write the story himself, only for reality to tear it from his grip. The plan was simple. Ruthless. Manipulative. Solo claimed his car had been vandalized in the backstage lot. He said Jacob Fatu did it. Said there was bad blood, jealousy, rage. Said Jacob had been growing unstable, unpredictable. Said he was becoming a liability to the family name. But what Solo didn't count on, what he never imagined, was that the law inside WWE had already been watching. And the truth had other plans. Security footage told a different story. Silent. Unblinking. Objective. It showed Solo arriving backstage hours earlier than scheduled. It showed him parking his own car behind the loading dock. It showed him, alone, stepping out, checking his surroundings. And then, it showed him pick up a lead pipe. The same lead pipe later found next to the vehicle. The same one Jacob Fatu was accused of wielding. There was no Jacob on the tape. No confrontation. Just Solo, staging the scene. Laying the trap. And waiting for the spark. So when WWE officials, flanked by local law enforcement, approached Solo midway through SmackDown, there was no grand speech. No shouting. Just a pair of cold, silver cuffs, and a silence that said everything. Solo Sikoa was arrested in front of thousands. Not as the feared executor of tribal justice, but as a liar caught in his own web. For the first time, the enforcer looked powerless. But to understand how this moment came to be, how the Bloodline, once united by blood, has spiraled into deception, betrayal, and arrests, you have to rewind the clock. You have to go back to where the cracks first began to show. There was a time when Solo Sikoa was Roman Reigns' most trusted weapon. Silent. Deadly. Loyal without question. He was the younger cousin who didn't flinch when orders were given. When Roman said handle it, Solo delivered. Whether it was Kevin Owens, Cody Rhodes, or even his own brothers, Solo followed through. He was the hammer in Roman's fist. But every weapon has a breaking point. And Solo's began to fracture when Roman disappeared. The absence of the tribal chief left a void. And nature, especially in WWE, abhors a vacuum. Solo tried to fill it. He declared himself the new head of the table. He barked orders. He crowned himself judge, jury, and executioner. But what he didn't anticipate was Jacob Fatu. Jacob, the wild hurricane of the Anoa'i family, wasn't interested in submission. He didn't kneel. He didn't pledge loyalty. He didn't flinch. From the moment he walked into SmackDown, Jacob carried himself like a man who owed nothing to anyone, especially not Solo Sikoa. The tension was immediate. You could feel it in every backstage stare, every stiff tag, every unsaid word between them. And while the crowd cheered their alliance, insiders whispered that this wasn't a brotherhood, it was a battleground. A powder keg with no fuse left. Then came the car. Solo's black Escalade, its front windshield smashed in, side doors dented, the driver's mirror torn off like a limb. It was a message, or so Solo claimed. A message written in violence by Jacob Fatu. But WWE law enforcement isn't built on whispers and tribal drama. They needed evidence. They needed facts. And they got them. The moment Solo's alibi crumbled under surveillance footage, the facade he built fell with it. He tried to say Jacob threatened him. He said he was protecting himself. He said the footage was doctored. But the more he spoke, the more it sounded like a man trying to convince himself that his own plan hadn't failed. Because it did. Spectacularly. And in the silence that followed his arrest, Jacob Fatu emerged, not as the aggressor, but as the man who had been wronged. Sources close to the locker room revealed that Jacob didn't speak after the arrest. Not to Solo. Not to Heyman. Not to anyone. He stood in the hallway, arms crossed, head lowered. Watching. Listening. Processing the betrayal not just as a professional, but as family. And here lies the tragedy. Solo didn't just try to frame an opponent. He tried to destroy his own blood. His own cousin. His equal. What drove Solo to this moment? Some say it was fear. Fear that Jacob's rise would eclipse him. That Roman's absence had opened the door too wide, and Jacob was walking through it without permission. Others say it was pride. That Solo believed only he was worthy of continuing the bloodline legacy. That Jacob's defiance, his refusal to fall in line, felt like a personal insult. But perhaps the darkest truth is this: Solo Sikoa wanted to be more than Roman's shadow. And in trying to step into the light, he burned everything around him. Including his own future. Because WWE is not just about power, it's about perception. And after tonight, the perception of Solo Sikoa is forever changed. He's no longer the silent destroyer. He's the man who lied. The man who staged a crime. The man who used family as a weapon. And what does this mean for the bloodline? Nothing good. Paul Heyman, the so-called wise man, was nowhere to be seen during the arrest. Rumors say he left the building early, after getting wind of what was coming. Some claim he knew. Others say he was blindsided. But one thing is clear: Heyman is not rushing to defend Solo. JUSO, the heart of the bloodline, has remained silent on social media. But sources say he's been texting Jacob privately, telling him, "I believe you." Jimmy USO is reportedly furious, calling Solo's actions disgraceful. And Roman Reigns? Roman hasn't spoken publicly. But insiders say a message was sent through his camp: this isn't bloodline business. This is betrayal. And that silence from the tribal chief? It's louder than any word Solo could cry out. Because once upon a time, the bloodline meant unity. Honor. Power through respect. Now, it's stained with suspicion, deception, and handcuffs. As Solo Sikoa sits in a holding cell tonight, stripped of his jacket, stripped of his image, he isn't just facing legal consequences. He's facing a reckoning. Because the brotherhood he tried to protect by manipulation? It's gone. And what remains is a man who forgot the first rule of family. You don't build a legacy by breaking blood. So where do we go from here? Jacob Fatu's silence may not last. There's talk of him addressing the WWE Universe next week, possibly revealing everything Solo tried to keep hidden. There's talk of new alliances. Of a new bloodline, reborn without betrayal. And Solo? His future is uncertain. WWE hasn't issued an official statement. The charges are under review. But public trust is harder to repair than broken glass. And the locker room? They don't forget easily. This wasn't just a car wreck. It was a reputation wreck. And in the ruthless world of WWE, that might be a harder recovery than any broken bones. Because in the end, betrayal doesn't just hurt your enemies, it destroys your legacy. And for Solo Sikoa, the cost of his plan backfiring wasn't just a jail cell. It might have been the end of his reign as the bloodline's enforcer. Forever. In the days that followed Solo Sikoa's shocking arrest, WWE headquarters went into quiet crisis mode. No official tweets. No press conferences. Just a growing storm behind the scenes. The kind of silence that feels like thunder waiting to explode. But it didn't take long for that silence to break, because on the next episode of SmackDown, the lights dimmed, the crowd went silent, and Jacob Fatu finally stepped out from the shadows. No music. No pyro. No theatrics. Just Jacob, walking down the ramp with a face carved from stone and eyes that told 1,000 stories he hadn't spoken, until now. He stepped into the ring, mic in hand, and stood in silence for nearly 30 seconds. Not because he didn't have anything to say, but because he wanted the crowd to feel what he felt: betrayal, shock, disgust, and something deeper. The pain of being stabbed in the back by blood. And then, with a voice heavy but steady, Jacob began to speak. You ever trust somebody so much you'd fight for them, just to find out they were setting you up the whole time? The crowd erupted. You ever call a man your brother, your family, ride for him, bleed for him, and then realize he was the one standing behind you with a knife? The air in the arena changed. You could feel it. This wasn't a promo. It wasn't scripted. It was raw. It was real. Jacob revealed that for weeks, things didn't feel right. That Solo had been pulling away. Whispering things behind closed doors. Turning people against him. Claiming Jacob was too wild. Too unstable. That he didn't belong. I thought I was fighting for the bloodline, Jacob said. Turns out, I was fighting with a ghost standing behind me holding chains. And then he paused. I ain't gonna cry. I ain't gonna beg. But I will say this, Solo, the next time I see you, it won't be court. It'll be a ring. The crowd lit up like a fire. Because in that moment, the lines were drawn. This wasn't just family drama. This was war. But the drama didn't end there. Backstage, cameras caught an unplanned moment. Paul Heyman arriving late to the building, flanked by security, face buried in his phone. When asked for comment by WWE digital staff, Heyman didn't offer his usual smooth-talking wisdom. Instead, he looked into the lens, eyes red, voice low, and said, I warned them. You split the bloodline, and blood gets spilled. Then he walked off. And in that brief moment, something was clear. Heyman was done choosing sides. Because Solo's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was strategic. He tried to eliminate Jacob before the war even began. And by doing so, he lit a fuse that can't be put out. Insiders say Heyman has gone silent in meetings. That he's withdrawn from all bloodline communications and hasn't returned Solo's calls since the arrest. Some claim he's waiting to see how the chips fall. Others say he's preparing something bigger. But everyone agrees, Paul Heyman is watching. Listening. Calculating. Because there's still one name we haven't heard from. Roman Reigns. The tribal chief. The architect of the original bloodline. The man whose silence now echoes louder than any speech. For over 100 days, Roman has been off TV. Rumors of injury. Of retreat. Of choosing to step back while the chaos sorted itself out. But now, after everything that's happened, the arrest, the betrayal, the cracks becoming canyons, sources close to WWE report that Roman Reigns is preparing to return. Not as a savior. But as a reckoning. Because if there's one thing Roman Reigns doesn't tolerate, it's failure. And Solo Sikoa has not only failed. He has tarnished the legacy Roman spent years building with sweat, blood, and pain. One source says Roman sent a single text to WWE Creative after Solo's arrest, he's no longer bloodline. Another says Roman has made it clear, there will be consequences. But here's where things get even more twisted. There are whispers, faint, dangerous whispers. That Roman isn't coming back to restore the old bloodline. He's coming back to build a new one. And who's at the top of his list? Jacob Fatu. It makes sense. Jacob didn't flinch. He didn't fold. He didn't crumble under pressure. He stood tall when Solo tried to drag him down. He handled betrayal like a king without a crown. In Roman's eyes, that's tribal leadership. And if Roman's coming back for war, he'll need warriors who don't break. But where does this leave Solo Sikoa? Sources from the legal team say Solo has been released on conditional bail. WWE hasn't terminated his contract, but all appearances have been suspended pending an internal investigation. He's disappeared from public view. No tweets. No videos. No press. Just silence. But if you know Solo, you know this isn't over. That silence? It's not surrender. It's strategy. Because even as his reputation burns, Solo Sikoa is a man who plays the long game. And if there's one thing more dangerous than a man with power, it's a man with nothing left to lose. Backstage reports suggest he's already planning something. A return. A redemption. Or maybe, revenge. Because no matter what happens next, Solo believes he was justified. That Jacob was rising too fast. That the family was slipping through his fingers. That framing Jacob wasn't betrayal, it was preservation. But the WWE Universe doesn't see it that way. To them, Solo is no longer the protector. He's the pretender. And now, as Roman Reigns prepares to return, Paul Heyman steps away from the wreckage, and Jacob Fatu rises from the ashes. The question isn't what happens next. It's who survives? Because the bloodline is no longer a dynasty. It's a battlefield. And the war? It's just beginning. There's something chilling about silence before a storm, especially when the storm is a man named Roman Reigns. For weeks, his absence haunted every corner of WWE. His throne was empty. His voice unheard. And his bloodline, once dominant, feared, untouchable, fractured like shattered glass. But the silence didn't last. On a rainy Monday morning, WWE issued a single press release. Just 6 words. Roman Reigns returns this Friday. SmackDown. That was it. No hashtags. No teaser videos. No spoiler leaks. Just a time. A place. And a promise. And when Friday arrived, the arena sold out within hours. Security was doubled. The locker room tension was thicker than fog. And backstage, the whispers had turned into prayers, because everyone knew, Roman wasn't coming back for applause. He was coming back for justice. The show opened without commentary. No theme song. Just darkness, and the low hum of tribal drums echoing across the stadium. Then, the screen lit up in white, the Chief returns. And when the lights exploded and Roman Reigns stepped onto that stage, draped in a black tribal cloak, eyes cold, beard thicker than before, time seemed to stop. He didn't raise his arms. He didn't smile. He just walked. Slowly. Deliberately. Like a king surveying the ruins of his kingdom. The audience didn't know whether to cheer or hold their breath. Because this wasn't the Roman Reigns they remembered. This was something colder. Sharper. More dangerous. He entered the ring. Took the mic, looked around. And then, he spoke. I left to give you power, Roman began, his voice low, each word deliberate. But power, in the wrong hands, becomes poison. He paused. Solo Sikoa, poisoned my bloodline. The crowd erupted. Chants of Jacob. Jacob, began to build in waves. Roman didn't flinch. He continued, I built this family with my bare hands. I made you relevant. I made you feared. And what did you do when I stepped away? You turned on each other like animals. He turned slightly toward the camera. And one of you tried to frame your own blood. He let that linger. And then he dropped the line that cracked the world in half. Solo Sikoa is no longer bloodline. The audience gasped. And then, acknowledge me. He didn't shout it. He growled it. And the arena trembled. Roman continued, but I didn't come back to clean your mess. I came back to build something stronger. Something real. Something that won't crack when I'm gone. He turned, and as the crowd stood on edge, Jacob Fatu's music hit. It wasn't a grand entrance. It was a war march. Jacob came down slowly, no smiles, no fear. Just power. He entered the ring. And for the first time, Roman Reigns and Jacob Fatu stood face to face. Two alphas. Two heirs. Two destinies colliding. The crowd held its breath. And then Roman did something nobody saw coming. He extended his hand. Not to fight. To offer. Jacob Fatu, Roman said. You didn't break. You didn't betray. You stood tall when they tried to bury you. You're what this family needs now. And then, he knelt. The tribal chief, Roman Reigns, bent one knee. The arena exploded. Gasps. Screams. Chants of holy yes. Jacob looked down at Roman. His lips didn't move. But his eyes said everything. Respect. Recognition. And power. Then Jacob pulled Roman up by the arm and hugged him. It wasn't a gesture of affection. It was a pact. The crowd roared. Commentators screamed. And just when the moment felt sealed in legend, Solo Sikoa's music hit. Not the tribal drums. Not the chants. A distorted, darker remix. And when Solo walked onto that ramp, there were no guards. No cuffs. Just a man burning with rage. He stared down at Roman and Jacob in the ring. And said, "You chose wrong, Chief." Roman stepped forward, fury in his stare. "No, Solo. I chose right. You chose betrayal." Solo laughed. Then dropped the mic. And walked off. No fight. No brawl. Just a storm leaving the arena, with lightning in its wake. Because this isn't over. Solo Sikoa isn't done. He may no longer wear the red lei. He may no longer call himself Bloodline. But what's coming is darker than war. It's family vengeance. And next week? Jacob Fatu vs Solo Sikoa. Not for titles. Not for pride. But for blood. And Roman Reigns? He'll be watching. Crown back on. Tribe reforged. But with one haunting truth looming over it all, the biggest threats always come from within. The battle lines had been drawn. Roman Reigns returned. Jacob Fatu was anointed. And Solo Sikoa had been cast out. But if the WWE Universe thought that marked the end of Solo Sikoa's path, they were mistaken. Because some men don't fade into exile. Some men burn it down. It started with a power outage. Just minutes before the main event between Jacob Fatu and AJ Styles was set to begin on the following week's SmackDown, the lights in the arena flickered, then died. Silence fell over the crowd like a shroud. And then, a single spotlight appeared at the top of the ramp. Standing beneath it was Solo Sikoa. But he wasn't alone. Flanking him, two figures, hooded, faces obscured by tribal masks. Massive. Menacing. Unfamiliar to the casual fan, but instantly recognized by those who knew the depths of Samoan wrestling heritage. They weren't WWE regulars. They were street legends. They were enforcers from the islands. Real ones. And they had come for war. Solo didn't walk. He marched. Straight to the ring. No music. No fanfare. Just the weight of betrayal and the promise of violence. Jacob Fatu stood his ground. Roman Reigns watched from a skybox, face unreadable. Security tried to intervene. But they were overpowered in seconds. The masked enforcers swept them aside like leaves in the wind. And then, the ring imploded into chaos. Jacob lunged at Solo. The two titans collided mid-ring like freight trains. Fists flew. The crowd roared. But the masked men joined in, turning the match into a brutal ambush. Steel chairs. Kendo sticks. Ring steps. Nothing was off limits. And when Jacob was finally down, bloodied, breathing heavy, but still trying to stand, Solo took the mic. "You took my place. Now I'll take your soul." Then he turned to the cameras. "To everyone who turned their back on me. Paul. Jay. Jimmy. Even Roman," a long pause. "I'm not the outcast. I'm the reckoning." Then he took a blood-red cloth from his pocket, wrapped it around his wrist, and said, "This is my bloodline now." The screen faded to black. Social media detonated. Hashtag Solo Sikoa trended within minutes. Fans were stunned. WWE personnel were shaken. Even locker room veterans reportedly had no idea the masked men were arriving. But Roman Reigns? He knew. Because just minutes after the broadcast ended, WWE posted a backstage clip of Roman slamming a monitor against the wall. His tribal lei ripped from his neck. His voice booming, "He brought outsiders into our house?" Heyman tried to calm him, but Roman shoved the table aside. "No more second chances. We end this." For the first time since the Bloodline saga began, Roman looked afraid, not of losing his title, but of losing control. Because Solo Sikoa hadn't just returned. He had declared tribal war. And this wasn't going to be settled with contracts or storylines. This was personal. This was ancestral. This was betrayal burning into legacy. That week, WWE filed emergency storyline updates. Rumors swirled of a faction war building for SummerSlam. A match too big for a ring. Too emotional for a belt. A bloodline civil war. Solo and his two new allies, known only as the Red Mark, versus Roman Reigns, Jacob Fatu, and a third warrior yet to be named. But who? Some whispered the name Zilla Fatu. Others dared to say The Rock. But no one could be sure. Because right now, the only thing anyone knew for certain was this: Solo Sikoa wasn't trying to reclaim the bloodline. He was building one of his own. A darker one. One not built on hierarchy or honor, but on pain. On revenge. On the belief that if they won't acknowledge you, make them remember you. Backstage, the tension was reaching a boiling point. Paul Heyman refused to speak to press. Jacob Fatu was said to be nursing real bruised ribs and a concussion from the ambush. And Roman? Roman disappeared from the building that night without saying a word. But his car, reportedly, didn't go home. It went to Florida. To the training camp of one name fans haven't heard in a while. Zilla Fatu. Because sometimes, to stop a brother, you need a son. It was quiet in Pensacola that morning. The ocean rolled in slow, patient waves across the Florida coastline, mirroring the rhythm of a decision that had been building for weeks. Inside a private gym tucked behind a nondescript warehouse, Zilla Fatu was finishing his final rep. Sweat dripped from his brow. His fists, taped and worn, trembled not from weakness, but from the burden of what lay ahead. Across the mat stood Roman Reigns. No security. No Heyman. No cameras. Just the tribal chief and the son of the legendary Umaga, face to face for the first time since the bloodline fell apart. Roman didn't speak right away. He let the silence stretch. Let the weight of their legacy fill the air like smoke. "You ready?" Roman finally asked. Zilla didn't nod. Didn't blink. He just stared. Then answered with 5 words, "Tell me who I'm fighting." Roman walked over to the far wall. Grabbed a remote. Pressed play on a flat screen. The footage began to roll. Solo Sikoa's ambush. The masked enforcers. Jacob bloodied in the corner. The message Solo left behind. Zilla watched every second. Not with shock, but with rage. Because Jacob Fatu had trained him, believed in him, called him family when others treated him like the forgotten son of a fallen warrior. And now, that family was bleeding because of Solo Sikoa. Zilla stood, ripped the wraps off his hands, and walked toward Roman. "I'll stand with you," he said, "but not as a favor." Roman raised an eyebrow. Zilla continued, "I don't fight for thrones. I fight for names. And that man out there," he pointed to the screen where Jacob was collapsed in pain, "that's the one who gave me mine." Roman didn't argue. He simply nodded. Because this wasn't about loyalty. It was about legacy. And now, the lines were clear. The civil war was real. On one side, Solo Sikoa, the self-exiled enforcer turned dark prince. The Red Mark, his masked mercenaries, brothers in destruction. On the other, Roman Reigns, the once undisputed tribal chief, now reclaiming his house. Jacob Fatu, the phoenix rising from betrayal. Zilla Fatu, the young lion fighting in honor of his blood. The match was set for SummerSlam. The Bloodline War, final verdict. No titles. No rules. Just pride. Pain. Punishment. But the days leading up to it only added fuel to the fire. Solo posted a video on social media. No filters. No edits. Just him in a dark room. "You brought in the kid," he said, laughing. "Zilla's not ready. I knew him when he couldn't throw a clean jab. Now he thinks he's family?" Then his smile faded. "You turned your back on the man who protected you all. You let him rot. And now you act surprised when I return with fire in my chest and killers at my side?" He looked into the lens. "Roman, you were a chief. But I'm the consequence." The video ended. The locker room was buzzing. Veterans like Randy Orton, Cody Rhodes, and Seth Rollins watched from a distance, knowing the WWE landscape was about to change forever. Because this wasn't a rivalry. It was a civil war with no center left to hold. On the next SmackDown, Zilla Fatu made his debut appearance. He didn't enter to fanfare. He entered carrying Jacob's towel, the same one soaked in blood from Solo's attack. And he laid it on the mat. "I didn't come here for clout," Zilla said. "I came to finish what Solo started." And couldn't. He stared into the camera. "Uncle," he said, "I respect what you built." Then he pointed at the screen where Solo's face loomed. "But it's time we burn what he broke." The crowd erupted. Roman Reigns walked out seconds later, no mic, no theatrics. Just walked into the ring, extended his hand to Zilla. And raised it. The bloodline was reborn. Not out of tradition. But out of rebellion. Out of pain. Out of the need to remind the world that family isn't something you destroy for control. It's something you protect with your life. And now, the war has a date. SummerSlam 2025. The Bloodline Civil War. Solo Sikoa, the Red Mark vs. Roman Reigns, Jacob Fatu. Zilla Fatu. Winner doesn't take titles. They take everything else. Respect. Legacy. The future. Because in this war, there are no rules. Only consequences. And by the time the dust settles, one family will walk out. The other will never be the same. The energy was unlike anything WWE had felt in years. Not since The Undertaker's last ride. Not since the Shield's implosion. Not since Roman Reigns first declared himself the head of the table. This was something else entirely. A bloodline civil war. 3 against 3. No championships on the line. Just generational pride. Real family. Real betrayal. Real stakes. The crowd was buzzing long before the match began. Every promo, every leaked backstage moment, Every haunting word from Paul Heyman had led to this. WWE's most sacred dynasty, tearing itself apart in front of the world. When the lights dimmed and the stadium screen read "Final Verdict, Bloodline War Begins," fans knew this wasn't just another main event. This was tribal justice. The entrances were a ritual. First came Solo Sikoa. Not with fireworks. Not with pyro. With war drums. Real ones. Pounding through the stadium like thunder from the gods. Flanked by the two hooded mercenaries known only as the Red Mark, Solo walked slowly, head bowed, his body wrapped in red cloth. Each step echoed like the toll of a bell. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't smug. He looked possessed. The kind of calm that only comes before chaos. Then came Jacob Fatu. Not limping. Not bandaged. Marching. Head high. Shoulder to shoulder with Zilla Fatu. Zilla wore Umaga's signature white Samoan war paint across his chest and face, a tribute so powerful, the crowd fell into stunned silence. He wasn't just walking to the ring. He was walking through history. And then, the arena went pitch black. Roman Reigns' theme hit, but not the version fans remembered. A remixed version boomed through the speakers, slower, darker, layered with chants in Samoan. And when Roman emerged, bare-chested, no gold, no vest, no pyro, he looked like something ancient. Like the ghost of a king returning from exile. He joined Jacob and Zilla at the base of the ramp. 3 men. 3 missions. 1 war. The bell rang. And all hell broke loose. It didn't start with grapples. It started with fists. Solo charged Jacob. Zilla took on one masked mercenary. Roman stepped toe-to-toe with the second. No tags. No rules. This wasn't a wrestling match. This was a tribal reckoning. Chairs were introduced within minutes. Steps were dismantled. Kendo sticks snapped like twigs. At one point, Solo Sikoa was seen biting Jacob's forehead, screaming, "You were never loyal." Jacob headbutted him so hard the rope shook. Zilla, still green to the ring but burning with purpose, launched himself from the top rope onto both masked men, sending the entire pile crashing through the announce table. The crowd lost control. This was violence dipped in history. Blood soon followed. Jacob was busted open early, but he fought on. Roman took a steel chair shot to the back from one of the masked men, and didn't even flinch. He turned slowly. Speared the man through the barricade. The turning point came 25 minutes in. Solo had isolated Zilla in the ring. The others were down. Roman was trying to climb back over the timekeeper's wall. Jacob was barely stirring on the outside. Solo screamed at Zilla, "This family was mine. You were a mistake." He lifted the steel chair. Paused. Then hesitated. Because Zilla was laughing. Blood dripping from his mouth. "You're not the head of the table," Zilla growled. "You're the one who got thrown off of it." Solo roared and swung, but Zilla ducked, slipped behind, and delivered a Samoan spike so brutal the crowd gasped. Solo dropped to his knees. Jacob rolled in. Roman climbed back over. All 3 men stood over Solo. And Roman picked up the mic. Held it close to Solo's face. And whispered, "Judgment." Then they hit it. Triple spear. Solo's body crumpled. Zilla covered him. 1, 2, 3. The bloodline had won. The crowd erupted. Not in joy, but in relief. It was over. The war was done. Roman knelt by Solo's body. Looked down at him, not in hatred, but sorrow. He said nothing. Zilla and Jacob stood at Roman's side. And in that moment, the bloodline was reborn. Not on lies. Not on fear. But on truth. Earned. Bled for. And finally, reclaimed. The show faded to black. But the story was far from over. Because while Solo Sokoa lay broken, the war had left scars. And some wounds? They don't heal. It was supposed to be the end. Solo Sokoa had fallen. The red mark was unmasked and dismantled. And the bloodline, Roman Reigns, Jacob Fatu, and Zilla Fatu, stood tall at the ashes of SummerSlam. But WWE doesn't deal in endings. Only echoes. And the echo that followed SummerSlam was named Paul Heyman. The Monday Night Raw after SummerSlam didn't begin with a celebration. It began with a stare. Backstage. Roman Reigns, seated alone in a dark corridor. The tribal lei was back around his neck, but his eyes weren't on the prize. They were distant. Heavy. Reflective. Across from him stood Paul Heyman. Silent. Studying. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low. Not with fear. But with something deeper. Regret. You won, Heyman said, stepping closer. But at what cost? Roman didn't reply. Heyman continued, his voice rising. You lost control of your house. Solo turned into a monster on your watch. You let the family burn, so you could come back and pick through the ashes like a hero. Roman looked up slowly. And for the first time since his return, he didn't look angry. He looked tired. Solo made his choice, Roman said. So did I. Heyman stepped closer. You think this is over? You think because you speared him through a barricade that the world will just fall back in line? A long pause. Heyman then said what no one dared to. There are others, Roman. Roman's brow lifted slightly. Heyman leaned in, whispering now. They saw the cracks. The war. The weakness. And they're not family. That word hung in the air. Not family. Roman stood. Who? Heyman hesitated. Swallowed hard. Then whispered two words, Tama Tonga. And everything changed. Because if Solo Sokoa had been the hammer that betrayed the bloodline, Tama Tonga was the sword from the shadows. A warrior of the islands. A leader of chaos. A man exiled long ago, whose name Roman never allowed to be spoken in the family circle. Until now. Cut to later that night. A match between the Street Profits and Imperium was underway. Standard fare. Fast-paced. Athletic. Until the lights cut out. Not flickered. Died. The Titantron glitched. Flashed with static. Then a voice played, distorted, low, gravelly. You crowned yourself king. You burned your brother. But the king's not the only one with blood on his hands. The screen lit up. A throne, surrounded by fire. And seated on it. Tama Tonga. No words. Just a glare. Eyes full of fury. He stood slowly, dragged a sledgehammer behind him, and pointed toward the camera. I'm coming for the crown. Then everything cut to black. The crowd was stunned. Commentators speechless. Social media exploded. Because in one night, the celebration had become a countdown. Roman Reigns had weathered Solo's betrayal. He'd survived Jacob's doubts. He'd earned Zilla's loyalty. But now, a ghost from the islands was returning. And this time, it wasn't about legacy. It was about revenge. Backstage, Roman stood in front of a monitor watching the feed. Zilla approached him. You know him? He asked. Roman didn't flinch. I know what he wants. Jacob Fatu entered from behind. And what's that? Roman turned to face both men. Everything. Because Tama Tonga isn't coming to destroy what's left of the bloodline. He's coming to claim it. To rewrite the story. To burn the whole tree down and build his own. And the terrifying truth? He might have allies. Sources in WWE say Tonga Loa has already been spotted at Performance Center training facilities. There's speculation Hikuleo is on his way from Raw. And whispers that a new hybrid faction is forming, not bound by blood, but by purpose. A purpose to end the Reigns era. And with Paul Heyman caught between legacy and survival, his silence may not last forever. Because as one insider close to creative put it, the bloodline survived betrayal. But what happens when the enemy is everything you tried to bury? And now, with SmackDown looming, Roman Reigns must prepare not for a match, but for a siege. SmackDown. 1 week later. A storm had formed, and not just in the skies above the arena. Inside the building, there was a different kind of thunder. The WWE Universe had gathered not to witness a title match. Not to celebrate a milestone. They were there to witness the fall, or the final stand, of Roman Reigns. By now, the cracks in the bloodline were fault lines. Solo Sikoa was gone. Paul Heyman's allegiance was in question. And now, Tama Tonga, the exiled fury of the Anoa'i dynasty, was calling for Roman's crown. The tribal chief had fought off mutiny before. But this time, the threat wasn't internal. It was the past. And past sins, like Tonga's exile, don't stay buried forever. The show opened in darkness. A video package rolled. Roman Reigns crowning himself tribal chief. Solo's betrayal. The bloodline's collapse. Jacob's return. Zilla's rise. SummerSlam. The war. And finally, Tama Tonga's declaration, "I'm not here to acknowledge you. I'm here to erase you." Then, boom. The pyro exploded. And without warning, Tama Tonga walked through the crowd. Not the stage. The people. Wearing a black bone necklace. No music. No spotlight. Just intensity that chilled the arena. He hopped the barricade. Climbed into the ring. And grabbed a mic. No theatrics. No slow build. Just fire. "You think this belongs to you?" he growled. "You think you're the last son of the island? I bled for this family. I fought wars for this name. And when I asked for a seat, Roman Reigns slammed the door in my face." The crowd was silent. Tama paced the ring like a beast in a cage. "You left me to rot in Japan. You told the world I wasn't worthy. And now you think you can come back, crown new kings, and call yourself chief?" He turned toward the camera. "You're not a chief. You're a gatekeeper. And tonight," he dropped the mic, "I break the gate." Then, head of the table hit. Roman Reigns walked out flanked by Jacob Fatu and Zilla. But something was different. Roman wasn't wearing his lei. He wasn't dressed in gold. He was dressed for war. Black pants. Bare chest. Samoan paint streaked across his face. He looked like the beginning. Before the crown. Before the belts. Before the empire. Roman entered the ring. Tama didn't move. And then, Roman pulled a mic from his waistband. "You want the seat?" Roman said. "Take it." He tossed the mic. And charged. The fight was on. No bell. No referee. Just fists and fury. Jacob and Zilla battled through the crowd with Tonga Loa and Hikuleo, who appeared from nowhere, blindsiding them from the ramp. The ring belonged to Roman and Tama. Spear attempts. Reversals. Elbows. Chokes. Both men bled within 5 minutes. The crowd was unhinged. Every strike felt like a decade of pain being exorcised. Roman hit a Superman punch. Tama bounced off the ropes. Hit a gun stun out of nowhere. Both men collapsed. Heyman appeared on the ramp. Watching. Frozen. Not as a manager. But as a man who realized the kingdom he helped build might not survive this night. Roman crawled to his knees. looked up. Thomas stood over him. Held up the lei Roman had left behind weeks ago. And said, "This doesn't belong to you anymore." He dropped it on Roman's chest. And walked out. No pinfall. No referee. No declaration. Just silence. Roman sat up. Held the lei. Looked at it. Then looked around. Jacob and Zilla climbed back into the ring. Bruised. Beaten. But alive. They stood behind Roman. Waiting for orders. But Roman didn't speak. He just dropped the lei onto the mat. And walked out. Past Haman. Past the titles. Past the legacy. Into the night. For the first time in over 3 years. Roman Reigns walked away, not as the tribal chief, but as a man. The crowd stood in stunned silence. Some cheered. Some cried. But everyone knew, the bloodline, as we knew it, was over. And from its ashes, a new dynasty had begun. It had been 7 days since Roman Reigns walked away from the ring. 7 days since he dropped the lei on the mat, turned his back on the empire he built, and disappeared into the night without a word. And in those 7 days, the WWE Universe hadn't heard a single update. No social media post. No backstage rumor. No paparazzi photo from an airport. Roman Reigns, the man who once held the entire wrestling world in his hand, was silent. And yet, his absence echoed louder than any promo, match, or championship celebration. The power vacuum he left behind was immediate. Some believed Jacob Fatu would step into the role. Others whispered that Zilla was being groomed to take the throne next. But neither man moved. They weren't celebrating Roman's departure. They were mourning it. Because for all the violence, betrayal, and war, the truth was simple: Roman had been more than a leader. He had been their compass. And now that compass was gone, shattered by years of power, pain, and the one enemy he could never conquer, himself. SmackDown opened that Friday night not with pyro, not with music, but with stillness. A black screen. Then footage began to roll. A slow montage, set to an orchestral score, showing Roman's rise from the days of the Shield, through his first coronation as tribal chief, his wars against Drew McIntyre, Cody Rhodes, Sami Zayn, Brock Lesnar. Then Solo's betrayal. Jacob's return. Zilla's debut. The Bloodline Civil War. And finally, his silent walkout. The final image was the lei, still lying in the center of the ring, untouched. Then we were live. And the camera opened inside the ring where Zilla Fatu stood, staring down at the lei. He didn't speak for the first minute. He just stood there, absorbing the weight of everything that had transpired. When he finally picked up the mic, his hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the knowledge that what he said next could alter everything. "I didn't come here to be king," Zilla said. "I didn't come here to replace Roman. I came here because I believed in what this family could be." He paused. But maybe belief isn't enough. Maybe everything we were building, maybe it died the second he walked away. The crowd was quiet, leaning in, hanging on every word. Zilla looked out into the sea of faces. "I've fought for this. I bled for this. I stepped into a legacy I didn't create, but I wanted to honor. I still do." The crowd stirred. Zilla stepped forward. "But if the bloodline is going to survive, if we're going to rise again, it won't be because we followed orders. It'll be because we earned our place. Every single step." Suddenly, the lights flickered. And then they died. A familiar pattern. The screen glitched. Static hissed. Then a phrase appeared in red letters: "You let him walk away." The crowd gasped. Then came the voice. Low. Raspy. Familiar. Roman Reigns didn't walk away because he was defeated. He walked away because he knew what was coming. The screen cut to a shadowed figure. His back turned. He spoke as he adjusted his wrist tape. "You thought this was over? No. This is just beginning. And now that your king is gone," the figure turned slowly, revealing a smirk beneath wild eyes. "I'm coming to finish the kingdom." The feed cut. Tama Tonga had returned. But this time, he wasn't just gunning for Roman. He was gunning for everything. Backstage chaos ensued. Paul Heyman was seen talking urgently with officials. Zilla threw down his mic and marched up the ramp. Jacob was pacing in the parking lot, fists clenched. It was as if they all felt it in their bones. This wasn't about tribal roles or family politics anymore. This was about survival. Later that night, Jacob Fatu appeared alone. No music. No entrance video. Just a camera following him as he walked through the backstage area, his hoodie pulled tight, his eyes cold. He entered the locker room and looked directly into the lens. "I told Roman once, we rise together or we fall together." He didn't answer. "Now I know why." He stepped closer. "Because Roman knew the war wasn't over. He knew we were still being hunted." Jacob leaned in. "Tama Tonga doesn't want respect. He wants destruction. He doesn't want to sit at the table. He wants to flip it." He threw a chair across the room. "I'm done waiting. Next week, I'm calling him out. Face to face. No family, no security. Just me and him. Because if he wants to finish something, he better be ready to bleed." The challenge was clear. But it wasn't just Tama who answered. The next morning, WWE.com quietly released a statement. "Tama Tonga will respond live next Friday on SmackDown, with backup." Speculation exploded. Backup? Was Tonga Loa returning? Was Hikuleo still aligned with him? Or was something even darker unfolding? As the days passed, fans dissected every promo, every tease, every subtle camera cut. And then something even more disturbing emerged. A leaked photo. A shot captured outside the WWE Performance Center. Tama Tonga sitting across from a man in a black hoodie. Their faces shadowed. But their tattoos unmistakable. It wasn't Hikuleo. It wasn't Tonga Loa. It was Sefa Fatu. Solo Sikoa. He was back. But not with remorse. With a new allegiance. The man who had tried to burn the bloodline from within was now joining forces with the very fire Roman feared most. And just like that, everything changed again. Roman's silence now felt strategic. Not surrender, but foresight. As if he knew. Knew that in defeating Solo, the war wasn't over, it was multiplying. And now, the bloodline wasn't facing exile. They were staring down extinction. SmackDown returned to sold-out arenas. The entire crowd humming with anticipation. As the cameras rolled, the Titantron lit up with 3 words, "Judgment is back." And from the shadows emerged Tama Tonga, flanked not only by Tonga Loa, but Solo Sikoa. Clean-shaven. Dead-eyed. Silent. Together, they walked to the ring as if nothing had changed. As if SummerSlam never happened. As if Roman's sacrifice meant nothing. And once in the ring, Tama raised the mic. The island chose wrong. He turned toward the camera. "Roman left you. Jacob's weak. Zilla's a child. But me? I never left. I never forgot." He motioned to Solo, who stepped forward, mic in hand. For the first time in months, Solo Sikoa spoke. "I was never the outcast." He looked directly into the camera. "I was the warning." And then came the last line. Tama turned once more and said, "If the bloodline wants a war," he paused. "They'll get extinction." The lights cut out. Show over. No music. No ending. Just a chill that stayed in the air like smoke from a dying fire. And in that moment, one thing was clear. This wasn't about reclaiming the bloodline. It was about erasing it. Forever. The next Friday was unlike anything WWE had seen in years. No tag matches, no championship segments, no backstage comedy. Every second of airtime was pointed like a blade at one story, the final fate of the bloodline. From the moment the arena lights dimmed, the air felt electric. No one needed reminding of what was at stake. Everyone knew. This was the moment. Not just of confrontation, but of reckoning. Roman Reigns had not returned. His silence remained complete. No texts. No calls. No sightings. He was gone, and the war had moved on without him. What remained was a blood-soaked battlefield filled with fractured brothers and fading gods. Jacob Fatu was the first to arrive. Shirtless, shoulders broad, scars visible, his chest painted in the same war paint that once adorned Umaga's face. He didn't march. He didn't strut. He walked like a man going to bury something sacred. Behind him, Zilla Fatu followed. He wore the lei. The same lei Roman had dropped in the ring weeks ago. But now it was repaired, sewn together with fresh flowers, every thread an act of defiance. They weren't just holding on to a legacy, they were fighting to rebuild it. As they stood in the ring, the crowd erupted in a chant, "Roman! Roman! Roman!" But the sound wasn't hopeful. It was desperate. A call to arms to a man who may never answer again. And then, everything stopped. A single tribal horn sounded. And from the smoke emerged the threat the crowd feared but expected, Tama Tonga. By his side was Tonga Loa, and flanking them in the rear, arms crossed, was Solo Sikoa. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't snarling. He was calm. Dangerous. The kind of calm that comes before a massacre. They entered the ring slowly. No music. No gestures. Just a standoff that felt like destiny folding in on itself. The crowd didn't chant now. They were silent. Reverent. Because what they were about to witness wasn't a wrestling match. It wasn't even a fight. It was a funeral. Tama took the mic first. "You had your moment," he said coldly, eyes on Jacob. "You had your war. You had your silence. But tonight, we end the name you built on lies. Because we're not the bloodline," he stepped closer. "We're the Purge." The crowd stirred, confused by the name. But then, as if summoned by the word, the Titantron lit up with a new logo, black, crimson, jagged lines forming an emblem that looked more cult than faction. The Purge burned across the screen. Zilla stepped forward, his chest heaving. "You say we built this on lies," he said. "You burned this house down because you weren't given a seat. You poisoned it with jealousy. And now you think you can wear the ashes like a crown?" Jacob took the mic from his hand. "You're not a king. You're a shadow. You're the sound in the dark when no one's listening. But tonight, we hear you." He looked directly at Solo. "And we answer." That was the cue. The brawl erupted. No referees. No bell. Just fists, fury, and finality. Zilla launched himself at Tonga Loa. Jacob collided with Tama, fists flying, elbows breaking flesh. Solo met Zilla in the center of the ring, and the two youngest warriors unleashed everything, every grudge, every betrayal, every broken promise. Security tried to intervene. They were tossed aside like leaves in a hurricane. Cameras struggled to keep up. Commentators were drowned out by the roar of the audience. This wasn't about storylines anymore. It was tribal law playing out in steel and skin. Jacob slammed Tama into the barricade. Zilla hit a Samoan spike so sharp it knocked Solo off his feet. And then, amidst the chaos, the screen lit up. Black. Then white. Then a single shot. A foot. Boots. Stepping through a corridor. The camera panned up slowly. And the crowd exploded. Roman Reigns was walking. But not toward the ring. Not toward the lights. Toward the backstage hallway where 3 chairs were set up. On each, a member of the Anoa'i Council, elders of the tribe. WWE's creative had gone all in. The elders stood as Roman approached. They didn't speak. Neither did he. They handed him a box. He opened it. Inside, the repaired lay. But this time, it wasn't for him. He looked toward the camera. Then he said the line that would break the internet. "I'm not the chief anymore." The camera cut. Back to the ring. Where Jacob and Zilla now stood, breathing hard, blood on their arms, but still standing. The purge had retreated. For now. But the war wasn't over. Because with Roman's return came a new order. A final message flashed on the screen as the show went off the air: the battle is over. The war for the island begins. It wasn't a statement. It was a warning. Because Roman Reigns was no longer the king. But he was still the judge. And his verdict? Was coming. Soon.